I never planned to keep the house, not really. It was our parents' place, an old brick colonial perched on a quiet corner lot, its porch sagging just enough to whisper time had passed. After they died in that car accident, I inherited it by name written clearly in the will. No confusion, no arguments. At least, that's what I believed. I offered to sell it. Told my younger brother, Jason, that we could split the money. I didn't need it. I'd made my life in a different city, working long hours in a law office that often felt like a pressure cooker with no valve. But Jason had other plans. He didn't want to sell it. I want to live here, he said one night over the phone, his voice uncertain. This house ... it reminds me of them. That got me. I've always been protective of Jason, even when we were kids. He was the charming one, the spontaneous one, the kind of person who jumped first and figured out the landing later. I, on the other hand, built my life with straight lines and hard edges. I planned, I calculated, I survived by staying ahead. So I let him stay. Signed an agreement, made it official, a legal rental agreement with a monthly token rent, barely enough to cover taxes. He laughed when I insisted we put it on paper. Always the lawyer, he teased. Always, I replied, smiling, unaware that years later, that paper would save me. Time passed, we spoke less. That's how it happens, doesn't it? Family drifts. Holidays became text messages, birthdays turned into missed calls. Jason stopped mentioning the house altogether, and I was to bury it in case files and deadlines to ask. Then one day, he told me he was getting married. Her name was Emily. I saw her only once at a rushed engagement dinner held in the backyard. She was beautiful in that glossy magazine kind of way. Everything about her was curated: long hair like woven gold, a voice that sounded rehearsed, and a way of looking at people as if they were applications to be accepted or deleted. She hugged me too tightly for someone who had just met me. She's a catch, Jason said that night, his eyes gleaming. Smart, knows what she wants. I nodded politely, sipping the wine I brought myself. But something in me resisted, a cold pinch behind my ribs. I couldn't place it. Then, after the wedding, I heard even less from him. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday long past midnight, when the mind drifts into dangerous places. I was still in the office, going over deposition notes, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered on instinct. Is this Ms. Hartwell? A male voice asked. Yes, this is she. This is Officer Regan with the Millbridge Police Department. We need you to come down to 200 for Wilford Avenue. We've had an incident involving your brother and his wife. My chest tightened. I didn't ask questions. I drove like the road was bleeding beneath me. When I arrived, I found Jason standing on the porch, his face pale, lips tight. Two officers stood nearby, hands on their belts. Emily stood behind him, arms crossed, cheeks flushed with rage. What happened? I asked, breathless. She called the cops on me, Jason said flatly. For breaking into my own house. Emily stepped forward, her eyes cold. I didn't know who he was. He came home drunk, banging on the door like a lunatic. I feared for my safety. Jason scoffed. I forgot my key. I wasn't drunk. I was locked out. I turned to Officer Regan. I'm sorry. There's been a misunderstanding. This is my family's home. Jason lives here legally. Emily's face turned sharply toward me. He used to. This house is mine now. I blinked. I beg your pardon? I asked. She raised her chin. Jason told me he inherited it, and after we married, it became ours. What's yours is mine, right? There was a silence. Jason didn't meet my eyes. A deep, bitter crack began to form in my chest. I reached into my coat, pulled out the folded rental agreement, now yellowing with time, and handed it to the officer. This is a legal rental agreement. The house is in my name. It always has been. The officers read it, eyes flicking between lines. Then, at Jason, who looked like he wanted to disappear, Officer Regan sighed. Then this is a civil matter, not criminal. We're leaving. They left. I didn't. Jason stood there, avoiding my gaze, while Emily stormed back into the house, slamming the door like a final judgment. Why would she think she owns it? I asked him quietly. He didn't answer. You told her it was yours. I pressed, the words sharp in my throat. I didn't think it mattered, he mumbled. We're married, she DOES and single quotes T. She doesn't need to know everything. You're lying to your wife, Jason, about my house. He looked at me finally. It's not like you ever needed it. You don't even live here. I took a step back, as if struck. That night, I returned to my hotel and poured myself a glass of bourbon, watching the city lights blink like tired eyes. My hands trembled not with sadness, but with something deeper. Something darker. Betrayal tastes different. When it comes from family, it's not sharp. It's slow, a rot. It seeps under your skin and whispers that love was never what you thought it was. I didn't sleep that night. 2 weeks passed. I said nothing, but I began to plan. I had always kept things in order. Documents organized, titles recorded, leases notarized. Every detail mattered to me, not just because of my profession, but because I understood how quickly life could unravel without paper walls to hold it steady. And now those papers would protect me from the storm Jason and Emily had started. I reviewed the lease agreement. It was watertight. I had emails confirming rent receipts, communications about maintenance, and, most importantly, the property title deed in my name. Recorded in the county registry. I called a property lawyer quietly, privately. Can I evict someone I've leased a property to if they've stopped paying rent? The lawyer asked me a few questions, then said, yes, if the lease has been violated, you can initiate eviction proceedings, even if it's my brother. The line was silent for a moment. Then, legally, yes. Emotionally, that's your call. I ended the call, sat at my desk, and stared at the eviction notice I had printed, unsigned. Was this revenge? Or justice? I thought of my parents, of the nights Jason had come into my room crying after a nightmare, of how I used to read him stories until he fell asleep. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who let his wife weaponize the law against his own blood, who stood silent while she tried to erase my name from the legacy of our family. I signed the paper. A week later, the notice was delivered. I didn't do it in person. I couldn't, but I drove past the house that night, parked across the street in silence. Inside, I could see them arguing. Shadows on the curtains, Jason's arms waving. Emily's voice muffled and shrill. She had no idea the foundation she stood on was never hers. She had walked into my family's house with her designer bags, her self-righteous entitlement, and thought she could reshape it in her image, erase me, rewrite the story. But she didn't know who I was. She didn't know I had built my life on fire and steel, that I had buried versions of myself to survive the world, that I didn't lose not without a war, and now the war had begun. They had 30 days. The eviction notice gave them 1 clean month to vacate. It was more time than the law required, a kindness, if you wanted to look at it that way. But I wasn't feeling kind. I received no phone call, no apology, not from Jason, not from Emily, just silence. But silence carries weight when it comes from family. It's not absence, it's accusation. Then, on day 3, an email landed in my inbox. Subject, really? Just 1 line, you're actually doing this? No signature, no greeting, but I knew it was Jason. I didn't reply. I could have sent back paragraphs, could have reminded him who paid the property taxes, who let him stay rent-free for 6 months when he lost his job, who kept the house in good condition so that he could live without worrying. But I didn't want to defend myself. I wasn't the one who lied. The following weekend, I drove to Millbridge again. This time in daylight. I needed to check the property legally. I still owned it, and now that the lease was in breach, I had every right. I approached the house quietly, parked across the street, and stepped onto the cracked sidewalk. The lawn, once trimmed, was overgrown. A pile of cardboard boxes sat beside the porch. Weeds pushed through the walkway. The wooden swing Dad built was gone, ripped clean from the beams. I swallowed my disgust. I rang the bell. A full 30 seconds passed before the door opened. Emily stood there, arms crossed, no makeup, eyes dark with fatigue. What? She snapped. I gave her a tight smile. I'm here to inspect the property. You're not welcome here. I don't need to be, I said calmly. The lease is void. The law is on my side. She stepped back, but didn't move to let me in. I just want to walk through. 5 minutes, she stared at me, calculating, then turned without a word, and walked into the living room. I stepped inside. The house smelled different now. Something sour beneath artificial lavender. It had once smelled like wood polish and fresh coffee. I remembered Mom humming while she cleaned, windows open, sunlight. In every room. Now the curtains were drawn. Boxes lined the hallway. The furniture had been rearranged, crowded together. An oversized leather sectional dominated the living room, where Dad's modest recliner used to sit. The walls were painted an awful beige, as if someone had tried to erase the past and failed. I moved through the rooms slowly. The guest room was stacked with Emily's clothing racks and makeup mirrors. The dining room had been converted into what looked like a makeshift YouTube studio. Lights, tripods, and a ring light pointed at a chair in front of a generic backdrop. "What is this?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. Emily's voice floated in from behind me. "My channel, product reviews, skincare, wellness content." I turned to her. "You turned my family's dining room into a backdrop for collagen sponsorships?" She rolled her eyes. This house had no energy, no life. I made it useful. I felt something curdle in my stomach. I wanted to say so many things, but I did in single quotes. Instead, I took a long look around. "This isn't yours," I said quietly. Emily's expression shifted. Something flickered behind her eyes. Fear, maybe, or hatred, or both. "Maybe not in writing," she said. "But Jason gave this to me. When you marry someone, you build a life. He promised me this was our foundation." I studied her for a moment. "You married a man who lied to you," I said, "and now the foundation is crumbling. You should ask yourself why." She said nothing. I left. 2 days later, I got a call from my lawyer. "They're contesting the eviction," he said, his voice flat. "They've hired counsel, claiming tenancy rights under common law marriage protections, but it's not common law." I said, "They're married." "Yes, but the lease was with Jason. She was never on it." "I know," he said. "It won't hold, but they're trying to buy time." Of course they were. I knew what was happening. Emily was behind it. Jason didn't know how to fill out a tax form without help. He had a way of folding under pressure, and she was pressure disguised as charm. I dug deeper. I pulled Jason's rent records. He'd stopped paying rent for months ago. Never told me, never responded to notices. I checked the county utilities. The bill was under her name now. That would complicate things, but not enough to save them. And then I found something that broke me: a loan. Jason had taken out a $40,000 personal loan 2 months earlier using the house's address as proof of stability. And it wasn't just a loan. He had listed the house as an owned property, a lie. A strategic one. That's when I knew this wasn't a mistake anymore. It was fraud, intentional, a long con that started the moment Emily entered the picture. They weren't building a future, they were staking a claim to mine. I showed up unannounced again, this time with a clipboard and a lockbox key. Jason opened the door. His eyes were bloodshot. "What now?" he said bitterly. "I came to inspect damages. This isn't a hotel, you know." "No," I said, stepping in. "It's a house, my house." Emily wasn't home. He was alone. As I walked through the hallway, I noticed new cracks along the crown molding. A hole in the drywall in the upstairs hallway. One of the bedroom doors had been removed, completely gone. I didn't ask where it went. I noted every detail. Jason followed me into the kitchen. "You really think this is necessary?" he asked. "Your wife contested the eviction. You left me no choice." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You always do this, treat me like I'm some child who needs to be disciplined. You made a decision, Jason," I said. "You chose to lie. You let her treat me like a stranger in my own home." He said nothing. "You could have told her the truth. We could have avoided this." He looked down at the floor. She wanted to feel secure. I didn't think it would go this far. "That's the thing about lies," I said. "They tend to do that." He looked up at me then, and there was something soft in his eyes, something I remembered. but it vanished quickly. She thinks you're trying to punish us. He said. I smiled coldly. I'm not trying, I am. On day 28, 2 days before the court date, I received another email. Subject: enough if you're trying to make a point, you've made it. We'll leave, just stop embarrassing us. I replied only once. You made your choices, now live with the consequences. They left the house the next evening. I arrived the following morning with the locksmith. The living room was empty, except for a broken end table and an empty bottle of wine. The kitchen sink was full of moldy dishes. Upstairs, the master bedroom had deep scratches along the hardwood, likely from moving furniture without care. I walked through it all slowly, methodically, like a detective examining the scene of a betrayal. I found a small box left in the hallway closet, told photos of our childhood. Me and Jason playing in the snow, birthday cakes. Our parents smiling. I stood there a long time, holding that box. And then I called the contractor. It was time to rebuild. On my terms. A week later, Emily went live on her YouTube channel. Someone sent me the link. She sat in front of a soft pink backdrop, looking composed, voice trembling just enough to seem sincere. I just wanted to tell you all what I've been going through, she began. We were evicted from the home we built by my husband's own sister. It's been heartbreaking, humiliating, but I believe in turning pain into power. She smiled at the camera. I'm starting a new chapter. We're healing. And to anyone out there who's lost their safe space, just know you're not alone. I watched the whole thing in silence. She never once mentioned that the house wasn't hers, that she'd called the police on the legal owner, that her healing journey had been paved with lies. But she had no idea the storm wasn't over because she thought this was about a house. She hadn't yet realized this was about truth, and I had plenty left to reveal. The video gained traction. Emily had that kind of face, soft, symmetrical, touched by lighting, and learned vulnerability. Her subscribers poured in with sympathy, comments filled with virtual hugs, well wishes, and words like toxic family and gaslighting. She'd spun herself as the victim of some cold-hearted, jealous older sister, hell-bent on control. It would have been almost laughable if it hadn't worked. I expected backlash from strangers, but I didn't expect to lose people I knew. Old friends, distant cousins, even a colleague from law school sent me a clipped message. Didn't realize you were capable of something so cruel. Cruel, not the lie, not the fraud, not the call to the police on a man she locked out of my house. No. The cruelty was mine for reclaiming what belonged to me. I didn't respond to any of them. I responded with silence. And then I responded with facts. I called a private investigator. Paid extra for discretion. He was ex-military, with a quiet presence and sharp eyes. I handed him a folder. I want to know everything about her, I said. Anything that's public, and some things that aren't. He nodded once. You'll have a file in 2 weeks. What he returned was a red velvet box of buried truths. Emily had a record, not criminal but checkered. 3 previous addresses, each linked to older men she had moved in with, then quickly separated from within a year. In 2 cases, she was listed on civil suits, one for unpaid rent after she claimed verbal ownership of a partner's condo, another for stolen items that were later misplaced. Settled out of court. She had a pattern: attach, entrench, claim, and flee. Jason wasn't her first target, just her most convincing one. I had the documents. I had the receipts, but I didn't post a video. No, that would have been her game. I played mine. I filed a small claims suit for damages to the property, $6,800 in repairs, holes in the drywall, broken fixtures, missing door, scratched floors. I had photographs, timestamps, and expert statements from contractors. Jason didn't show up to the hearing. Emily did. She wore white, like she was attending a wedding or a funeral. When the judge asked for her response to the evidence, she said, "This is harassment. She's just trying to punish us for being happy." The judge looked over his glasses. "I don't see any legal basis for your claim of harassment," he said. "What I do see is credible evidence of property damage, and no counter evidence from you." The judgment was swift. I won. I didn't need the money. That wasn't the point. A judgment against her name meant a record, one that sponsors and companies could see. The very next month, 3 skincare brands pulled out from her partnership list. One even posted a cryptic note about reevaluating collaborations based on new information. The silence from her side was delicious. I hadn't spoken to Jason in almost 2 months when he finally called. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice frayed. "You mean protecting what's mine?" I asked. "She's not a bad person. She called the police on you, Jason. She lied to you." "She made you lie to me. I didn't mean to. I just wanted a life, something of my own. So you tried to take mine?" I asked, more tired than angry. He went quiet. "I'm sorry," he said. "You didn't deserve any of it." "Those words were years too late. You let her try to erase me," I said. "You let her walk through the bones of our childhood and claim them like trophies." He said nothing. "You chose her," I whispered. "Even when she stood on stolen ground." I know, it wasn't enough. But it was something. The house took time to restore. I hired a team that understood heritage homes, old wood, lead paint, layers of memory. We repainted the walls with muted greens and soft creams. I had the old wooden swing rebuilt from the same plans Dad had drawn up in a spiral notebook decades ago. I replaced every piece of furniture Emily had brought in, down to the last velvet cushion. It felt like exorcism by design. One afternoon, as the light poured through the upstairs windows, I walked barefoot across the newly polished floorboards. The smell of lemon oil and wood filled the air. I passed my old bedroom, paused, then opened the door. It was empty. Not with sadness, but with peace. I had finally come home. 6 months later, Jason sent me a letter. No return address. Just folded notebook paper. I left her. I should have done it sooner. She always wanted more, and I kept giving until there was nothing left of me. I know I lost you. I just hope I haven't lost everything. I miss when we used to laugh over cereal. I miss before money and lies and lawyers. I miss my sister. Jay, I sat on the porch swing, reading it twice. I didn't cry, but I didn't throw it away either. A year passed. The house became a haven. I didn't live there full-time. I still had my apartment in the city, but I visited often. I let light back in. I planted hydrangeas in the backyard. I framed the old photographs that Jason had left behind and placed them in the hallway. I hosted dinners, invited old friends, told stories. People often asked, "Is it weird to live where your parents did? Doesn't it feel like a ghost house?" But I just smile because they didn't know the truth. The house wasn't haunted. It was alive. It had endured love, loss, betrayal, and then healing. It had been claimed by someone who thought she could walk in and rewrite its history with nothing but charm and entitlement, but the deed said otherwise. The walls remembered, and so did I. Epilogue. One morning, I received a message request on Instagram. I barely used the app, but something made me open it. It was from an unfamiliar account. No profile picture. Message: "You think you won, but you're alone now. Enjoy your empty house." I stared at the message, then deleted it. She was wrong. The house wasn't empty. It was full of truth, and truth is something she'd never been able to live with, but I could, and I did.